Okay. So for those of you who didn't see the last time, whenever we do creationism on the wheel, we've been chipping away at the Kent Hovind dissertation. Last time we did the introduction. This time we're going to be doing chapter 1, which is going to be the history of evolution, which is going to be bad. Let's just say. Kent Hovind, for those of you who don't know, did we not finish that last week? No, that was just the introduction. This is like the first part. We did not read this. So, Kent Hovind, for those of you who don't know, he has a doctorate, and by doctorate, I mean he doesn't have a doctorate. He got his doctorate through this diploma mill, and he wrote this dissertation, lots of air quotes in this one, and it literally starts with, "Hello, my name is Kent Hovind," which is not how you would start a dissertation. He's a creationist. He went to prison for 10 years for like 50-something counts of tax fraud. So he's a felon. He got out of prison a couple years ago, and he's trying to get his grift going again. He's a really awful human being. A kid died at his theme park a while back, and he didn't care, like, at all. He's just a bad guy all around. So, let's see what the first chapter in his dissertation's about. The history of evolution. Yeah, a kid died at his park. They drowned in the pond. And since then, he's been very blasé about it. He's like, oh, the parents should have been watching him, blah, blah, which might be the case. I'm not even disagreeing. But, like, he has no tact at all in discussing the death of a child at his awful theme park. Where in the world did the idea come from that things left to themselves can improve with time? Who would start a crazy idea like that? That's reductio ad absurdum. You're basically taking the big concept that's complicated of evolution and boiling it down to a ridiculous sentence. This idea,
about the tools of capitalism.
Dude spanking dudes with a bit. I remember kids, you can get 40 years for selling weed, but only 10 years for committing fraud. Yeah, it wasn't even a one count, it was like 50 counts. This idea is the opposite of everything that we observe in the world today, except literally all animals and how they change over time, and how diseases change over time. It's different than everything we observe in the world today, except the really big thing that I'm talking about, which proves that what I'm saying is wrong. For instance, all the highways in our nation today, left to themselves, decay, deteriorate, and fall apart. Yeah, well, they're inanimate objects, Kent. Do roads either photosynthesize or respirate? Do they take in energy and reproduce and mutate? They don't. So that would be why they don't do that. Entropy is a thing, but entropy applies in closed systems. The road, for instance, it's not taking in energy from anywhere. It's not doing anything. It's just sitting there. So over time, it's going to degrade. But living things, as it turns out, are taking in energy. Where are they taking in energy from? If they're a plant, then they're taking in energy from the sun, which is being converted to energy for them via photosynthesis. If you're an herbivore, you're taking the energy from the plants, eating them, and digesting them into chemical energy for your body. If you're a carnivore, you're doing the same but another level up towards herbivores. If you're an omnivore, you can kind of do a variety of things. So that's the difference. Roads are not the same as living beings because they aren't alive. They don't reproduce. They don't mutate. They don't face like natural pressures that are going to conform to some kind of natural selection as animals do. So that would be the difference. A house left to itself will become a wreck. It takes work and constant planning to make anything improve. Again, if we're talking about inanimate objects in closed systems, your house is a closed system. It isn't taking in energy and doing things with it. Living beings are. They're taking in energy, growing, changing, reproducing, and mutating. These are things your house can't do. Everything tends towards disorder, again, in closed systems, but the Earth is not a closed system. We get light and energy from the sun. The universe itself is a closed system, at least as far as we can tell. So we have this concept of entropy that over time eventually will probably face heat death of the universe, because things are moving further and further apart from each other, and the energy is sort of dissipating outwards. But, yeah, not the same thing as the Earth, which gets energy from the sun, and then allows beings within it to change, grow, reproduce, so forth and so on. Where's the chat? Okay, there we go. Why is entropy so misunderstood commonly? I don't know. You'd have to ask a physicist about that. By the way, photosynthesis and respiration are not mutually exclusive. Plants respire after photosynthesis. Okay, I didn't know that. Thank you, Baha. The first and second laws of thermodynamics are well-established scientific laws that have never been observed in the universe to be broken. That sentence is correct. The first law says that matter cannot be created nor destroyed by ordinary means. Correct, and it isn't. We do not see anything being created today, and yet we do see an entire universe of created material. Yes, this clearly indicates a creator. Nope, you lost me right there. No, it does not. Because literally, the law of thermodynamics says nothing can be created or destroyed. The furthest back we can see in time is the singularity that then expanded because of the Big Bang. That doesn't mean that there wasn't something before that somewhere in some form. We literally cannot see before that point, because that's the beginning of everything we know as time and matter and gravity and electromagnetism. All of it came from that point. But that doesn't mean that there wasn't something else, whatever that means, that it came from. Does that make sense? And if you have to, I shouldn't have to say this, but if you're positing that there is a creator, whether that be the Christian God, as Kent believes, or any other super being, you haven't solved the problem of things not being able to be created or destroyed. You've just moved it up another level. Now you just have to explain, boy, how did this omnipotent, omniscient God being come to be? And you can't just say, well, he's always been. That means nothing. That doesn't mean anything. He's always been. Okay, why has he always been? In what form? And why did he decide to create a universe? There are people in the world today who wish to avoid the concept of God. They do not like the idea of a God telling them what to do. No, like, I'm non-religious. I'm an atheist. If you're religious, that's fine. More power to you. Cool. As long as you're not using it to hurt other people, like any belief system. I don't believe in God, not because it would annoy me that someone was telling me what to do, although I would argue some of the things in the Bible and the things that the God of the Bible says are quite immoral. It's because I think there's a lack of evidence. If there was evidence that a God existed, whether it be the Christian God or some other kind of God, I would believe in that God. I wouldn't necessarily worship them. That's an entirely different conversation altogether. But I recognize things in the observable universe with evidence because I'm a reasonable human being. If there was a God, and there was evidence that there was a God, fine, I'd accept that God existed, but there isn't, so I don't. Therefore, they have to come up with the most dangerous, damnable doctrine ever imagined. Evolution. I would like, in this chapter, to trace the history of evolutionary doctrine. Where did this dangerous doctrine come from? Saying that the concept of evolution is dangerous is like saying that the concept of gravity is dangerous. I'm sure he's going to bring up, like, the idea of eugenics, which is awful. But saying that you don't believe in evolution because eugenics is bad is like saying you don't believe in gravity because dropping bombs on people is bad. People use scientific concepts for all sorts of awful reasons. Maybe a better example would be, I don't believe in an atomic theory because of the nuclear bomb, right? Or saying, I think that atomic theory is evil because nuclear bomb. That's a ridiculous statement. Human beings have a proclivity for using tools for all sorts of different things and plying our understanding to all sorts of different ends. Some of them very good, some of them very evil. But just because tools and understanding can be used to evil ends does not inherently mean that the concepts that we understand themselves are evil. Does that make sense? Like, nuclear fission or nuclear fusion, whatever, can be used for great destruction and evil, or it can be used to create clean energy for people. Neither informs whether or not the concept of understanding how atoms work and how you can split them or fuse them, neither of those things informs whether that is good or evil or true or not. Irrelevant. Thank you to Vigor6 for following. Evolution is purely a religion. This is what I don't get about Kent Hovind either. He'll use the term religion almost in a derogatory fashion towards evolution while simultaneously espousing the virtue of his own religion. So which is it? Is religion good or bad? You can't just say, well, evolution is just a religion, which it isn't. But my religion's really great. You should actually teach my religion in school instead of evolution. Contradictory. There is no scientific evidence at all to back up any form of macroevolution. Well, Kent, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but that's incorrect. We have the fossil record, we have genetics, we have literal lab tests where we've seen species evolve. And this distinction, by the way, that creationists will have between, like, macroevolution and microevolution, they describe it like this. They say, well, microevolution exists because, like, a dog can become different kinds of dogs. They have to concede this, of course, because we see all sorts of different, varieties of dogs that have been diversified due to artificial selection by humans, which is more or less the same mechanisms as natural selection, just commandeered by human beings. So they have to concede that. But then they draw an arbitrary line and say, but a dog can't become something that isn't a dog. That's macroevolution. That's different. No such distinction exists. No such distinction exists. Period. End of story. All that they're saying is, well, we see evolution on this smaller scale, but that doesn't mean it exists on a bigger scale, but it literally does. It literally does. If you could see something on the smaller scale happening, you can extrapolate that outwards. There's no walls in terms of evolution. There's nothing saying that if you bred one breed of dog one direction for 50,000 years, and I'm talking about artificial selection, so it's going to go a little quicker, I think, than natural selection, just because you can kind of hone in on intentionally keeping the populations apart and selecting for certain traits. And a different dog breed, a completely different way, for 50,000 years. Maybe you want one, this one's going to live in the Arctic, and it's gonna be like a sled dog, but like a super sled dog. We're going to get them real big and meaty so they can be protected from the cold, and they're going to be rugged. And then we're going to have this one, and they're going to live in the desert, and they're going to maybe get smaller because they need to survive on less food, they need to be able to conserve water more easily, whatever. Those are your goals. If you come back and look after a certain period of time, 50,000 years or whatever, they're not going to look like the same animals. They're not going to be the same species anymore. Microevolution, as they call it, is just macroevolution, but you're looking at it real close on the time scale. If you back up, all evolution is that microevolution from generation to generation. Little tiny changes. Because evolution is not this stair step like creationists often will illustrate. They'll be like, well, a dog's never given birth to a cat. And they think that's how evolution works. Like one day, a chimpanzee gave birth to like a Homo sapien human being. And it's like, well, that's evolution. No. In evolution, when you look from one generation to the generation right after, there'll be very little change. But if you look at the first in a chain and then you have 1,000 generations, the first one and the last one are going to look very, very different. Even though each subsequent generation in between looks very similar to the one next to it. This is how evolution works. It's a gradient. What else? The technical definition of evolution means change. There is no question that things do change. All change is directed either downward towards less order if left to themselves, or upward with a mastermind behind it. No, not the case. Not the case. Again, in closed systems with non-living beings, yeah, I would agree with you. Your house, if you leave it alone, is gonna decay over time. But if you have animals that are taking in energy from the sun or some other source, there are even deep-sea creatures that like get energy from like thermal vents or whatever. As long as you have an external source of energy that you're drawing from, you can grow and change and reproduce. And when things reproduce on planet Earth, because they have DNA, that DNA can have mutations that are going to change what the animal grows to be, what the animal is going to be. And these mutations, as they sort of accumulate over time, create a much different being 100, 1,000, 10,000 generations down the line than you had at the beginning. Whatever arbitrary start point you're starting from. A college professor told me that cities evolve with time. I said to him, I agree. If you use this as your definition of evolved, then you're including a design, a designer, and lots of work, planned, intelligent progress, not chaos ordered by itself. Kent Hovind, derailing class because he doesn't understand what colloquial meanings of words mean and that they are different than scientific definitions. Not one of the buildings in your city built itself by the material raising up out of the ground. It did not happen that way. It did not ever happen that way. No one's claiming it did. Those buildings aren't alive. It will never happen that way. It requires intelligence and a designer because you're moving inanimate objects, because you're ordering inanimate objects to be a shelter. They don't grow. They don't change, they don't mutate, they don't reproduce. We're talking about inanimate objects versus animate objects. This has nothing to do with evolution. When I speak of evolution, I am not referring to small minor changes that occur naturally as animals have to make some adjustments to their environment. That's evolution! You got it! Give Kent a round of applause. He basically gets it. That's that. It just happens over really long periods of time. Those tiny adjustments within a species. Because let's say, I don't know, let's say, 123 viewers, nice. Let's say, for instance, we're talking about something like eyes. Often people like Kent will talk about what they claim is irreducible complexity. Irreducible complexity is the idea that certain features in animals could not have come from less complex features. The way they explain it is often something along the lines of, half of an eye isn't an eye, and it's worthless. Why would that evolve? Of course, misunderstanding completely how evolution works. It doesn't, like, slot things in one part at a time. So let me give an example. Let's say you're like an amoeba. You're a single-celled organism, or maybe even a little bit bigger. I don't know. Whatever. Let's not even say that. You're a tiny, tiny fish. You're not exactly a single-cell organism, but you're not really big either. You're maybe not a full fish. Whatever that might mean. All of a sudden, you get a mutation where some of the cells on your surface, on the surface of your body, start to be able to react to light, to visible light, what we know today as visible light. And because of this, This mutation allows you to see which direction is up in the water. You don't know it's up, because you're, a tiny little thing that doesn't have self-awareness. But you sense, oh, there's something up there. What you're seeing is the sunlight coming through the surface of the water, and down, it's dark. And up there, there's more food, because closer to the surface of the water, you're going to have more organisms, assuming you're eating, like, microorganisms and stuff. So because of this adaptation, because you have these photosensitive cells, you're able to follow that towards food. Now, this is advantageous. No one else in your species has this. So you're able to successfully hunt for more food and survive longer than almost anyone else in your species, maybe than anyone else, and that allows you to reproduce many, many times. Now, luckily, all these children that you have, whether it be sexual reproduction or asexual reproduction, if it's like a smaller, organism that's not very complex, they have that same mutation. It's been copied from you onto them. Now you have a whole group that are photosensitive, have these photosensitive cells on their surface. Now they're going to be more successful than anyone else in the species, and they're going to propagate more, and their kids are going to propagate more, and so on and so forth. And every once in a while in that chain, maybe one of those kids, their photosensitive cells get a little more refined. They can see light either more or in a more refined way. They can see things more than just maybe brightness and darkness, but maybe they start to be able to see things like movement, stuff like that. And then the same thing happens. The same thing occurs. That propagates as that makes them more successful in getting food and being able to reproduce. This is how evolution works. Lots of little changes within a species that allow that change within the species to propagate throughout it, because those with that adaptation are more successful at either like gathering food or saving energy, basically anything that makes them more successfully be able to reproduce, because reproduction is how you more or less chart the success of something within the species or something like this, right? They're able to propagate very successfully because of these adaptations. And each one of these little steps along the chain from, a couple of photosensitive cells to complex eye is just a little step. But when you look at where you're at up here with the human eye, and we're not even the best seers in the world. I mean, there are birds like falcons who can just see crazy far distances, but we're doing pretty good for ourselves in terms of our ability to see. Each little step between those photosensitive cells and our eyeballs is very small. It's a very gradual change, but we've been on this planet, living beings, for billions of years. So even though it's little tiny steps, when you look at the beginning and you look at the end, there's a huge difference. So when you say something's microevolution, all you're doing is zooming in on that chain and looking at a little tiny thing and going, well, that's it, that's the end of it. But no, that's not the case. You need to zoom out and look at the whole thing. That's what people like Kent either misunderstand or intentionally obfuscate because they don't want it to get in the way of the point they're trying to make religiously. So he says, for instance, if we released hundreds of rabbits in an area with cold winters, only the animals with the heavier fur would survive. Yes, that's how evolution works. So within a few years, the population would have a little heavier fur than the earlier populations, correct? These small, minor population shifts brought about by environment are referred to as microevolution. No, they're not. They're just evolution. They're just adaptations. There's been no change in the genetic material of the rabbit. What? What do you mean there's been no change in the genetic material of the rabbit? If there are rabbits with more fur in the population, there are genetic factors that are factoring into the thicker fur. What? It's not magic. You think there's some non-genetic factor that's going like, oh, we better give them better fur. No, it's genetic. It's absolutely genetic. There's only been a change in the ratio of the population. Okay, but Kent, how do you think the ratio changes? If not genetically, those changes are genetic in nature. That leads to a more successful phenotype. In this case, thicker fur. But that thick fur is dictated by a gene somewhere in the rabbit. And that's what's causing that to happen. And the reason it's propagating is because it's allowing them to be more successful, to survive and propagate. Therefore, it spreads throughout the population through their offspring. That's evolution. There's only been a change in the ratio of the population. You still have the same kind of animal. Another word they throw around a lot is kind, because it's the word that's used in the King James Bible to differentiate animals. Like, oh, there was this kind and that kind. Kind is not a scientific definition. It's not even a useful definition. Because if you push anyone on this sort of thing who's a creationist and like, oh, they can't change between kinds. And you're like, okay, define a kind. They'll kind of gesture and they'll be like, oh, dogs. Dogs are a kind. Like, they're canines. Canines are a kind. And felines, they're a kind. And monkeys, they're a kind. It's arbitrary. It's basically like kids' picture book level thinking. These animals look similar, therefore they are a kind. And often, they do look similar because they're, like, in the same, like, group or whatever. Sorry, I forget what the groupings at that level are called when you're, like, canine, feline, stuff like that. Maybe Baja can let me know. The Ender 92 with 100 bits. See previous bits for a not very funny joke. Hold on. Did I miss one? Sorry. Let me go look. Hannah, show me how things change kinds. This mutation, not evolution. Sarcasm heavily implied. Clade. Thank you. So often they'll be talking about, like, clades. And they think that means the same thing as kinds. But it doesn't. Which is funny to me, too. Because honestly, if you were looking at, like, if that's what you were doing and you were doing, like, a picture book, like, surface analyzation to be like, what kinds are human in? It becomes very clear that we belong in, like, the ape kind, right? Like, look at us versus a chimp or a bonobo. We clearly belong in the same kind, but they're like, no, not the same thing. Because fur or something. Even though we have hair. If the climate were to change back to a milder climate, the population of animals would change back to having lighter fur. Again, but that would be through evolution. Same thing. Macroevolution would be defined as changing into a different kind of animal. But again, how do I explain this in such a way? Taxonomy is an interesting science. It's great. But how do I put this? Nature doesn't make much of a distinction between... Oh boy, how do I explain this? There are very few hard lines in nature. Let me put it that way. It's why you can have things like ligers. They're not able to reproduce like lions and tigers are, but the fact that those two are genetically similar enough that they can reproduce and make a liger or a tigan, or whatever that's called, means that it's not really a hard line between lions and tigers, right? Even though they're different species, they're closely related enough that they can create a viable offspring. Or at least viable in the sense that it is alive, not viable in that it can reproduce and be its own thing. So, when you're talking about, like, one kind to another, it doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. It's, again, like these creationist people expect one day to wake up and a dog gave birth to a cat, and that's not what evolution is saying. And it's been explained to Kent many times that that's not how evolution works. It's a slow change. It's an accumulation of small changes over time. What's up?
Mostly people define species as
the
animals that can produce offspring that are fertile.
Okay. Animals that can produce offspring that are fertile is the definition of a species.
So, lions and tigers are not the same species.
I know, I didn't say they were.
You did. You said, well...
I didn't say they were the same
You
species.
said they're similar enough that they can reproduce
Yes. I didn't say they were the same species. Don't put words in my mouth.
I swear you did.
I did not.
It was a misspeak, but you did.
No, I didn't. Lions and tigers aren't the same species. I wouldn't say that because I know that's not true. I said they were similar and related enough to make an offspring. There's no similarity between microevolution and macroevolution. They're the same thing. Many evolutionists will use microevolution to try to prove that macroevolution is true. We must guard ourselves not to fall for this false logic. What? No, they're the same thing. There's no distinction between micro and macro. It's just all evolution. The idea that evolutionists try to get across today is that there is a continual upward progression. Upward is a strange choice of words. Upward implies that it's like constantly getting better, or that it's like going towards an end goal, and that's not the case. Evolution is a continual change, but it's not a change towards an end. It's not going upward. It's not like a million, 2 million, 5 million years from now, if human beings exist, that like evolution is going to turn us into like super beings. It's just that it will continue to change us to suit our environment. Why are ligers an auto-blocked term? I don't know. I didn't do that. That's weird. They claim that everything is getting better, improving, all by itself, as if there is some inner drive towards more perfection and order. No, that's not what evolution says. It just says things are changing over time. Not the same thing as saying things are constantly getting better. If an animal remains in the same environment for generations and generations, then it's likely that that animal is going to evolve to become more fit to survive and reproduce in said environment. But the environment is always changing, even on the long term, if we're talking long term, right? So even if you get set and like you're ideal for a specific environment, eventually that environment's going to change, or your population is going to spread out to a different area, and you're going to have to change again. Stuff like that. It doesn't mean that we're getting a better and better, like, we can rebuild him better, faster, stronger. That's not how it works, right? It's just that things change to suit their environment over time. This is totally opposite of the first and second laws of thermodynamics. Again, no, it's not. Animals don't exist in a closed system. We're getting energy from the sun. Plants get energy from the sun, and animals eat the plants, get energy from there, and then other animals eat those animals and get energy from there. It goes against all scientific evidence that has been accumulated. Untrue. Yet this lie is what many men believe today. We don't see it happening anywhere in our universe today. We don't see any evidence of this in the fossil record. We literally do, though. We literally do. Hold on, let me see. What search engine is this? I don't even know. I'm having to use Microsoft Edge because that's what I'm reading his document on. Hobo Skillet, thanks for following. Daddy Sume, if this is a Rickroll. Oh, I can't play. What don't you understand about I can't play DMC? I can't play music. DMCA, friends. You want me to get banned? Oh, it's Bing? Oh, no. Fossil record evolution. We literally see this in fossils of various animals. We see change over time. There are a lot of illustrations showing this change, but these are based on actual fossils that exist, right? There's one of a horse. There's the whale. Here's human beings. There are all sorts of examples of this in the fossil record, of seeing species speciate over time, right? That's why there are distinct hominids other than Homo sapiens that pre-existed. Was it supposed to be the timestamp of better, stronger, faster? Why do I F up constantly? I don't know. Dude spanking dudes. According to all known laws of aviation, there's no way that a bee should be able to fly. Do you like jazz? I would like to trace the history of evolution, beginning with the fall of Satan from heaven. This is a doctorate, this is a doctoral dissertation. The history of evolution, beginning with the fall of Satan from heaven. I think you're going to have a hard time finding historical sources for that. Through the last 6,000 years, oh god.
Funny about the tools of capitalism.
The B comment is wrong. That's not a real quote. Yeah, I know it's not true. To modern day evolution and explain what those teachings this doctrine have planned for the future. To really understand the history of evolution, we have to understand the author. Satan is the mastermind behind this false doctrine. He was thrown out of heaven because of his desire to exalt himself to godhood. One of the underlying reasons that evolution appeals to so many people is because it appeals to man's pride. Isaiah 13:11 says, I will cause the arrogant... Wait a minute. Appeals to man's pride. Evolution just teaches us that we're animals.
There's nothing funny
Like
about the tools of
every other
capitalism.
animal on the planet. And that our history goes back and we have a common ancestor with those. That's a humbling fact. Like, you're the one who's like, actually, God and I are buddies. We're his favorite creation. He literally made the whole universe and all the animals just for us. We're the most important thing in the universe. Now, which of those belief systems sounds like it benefits man's pride? Isaiah 13:11 says, quote, I will cause the arrogancy of the proud to cease and will lay low the haughtiness of the proud. God is against pride. In Isaiah 14:12 through 14, the Bible tells us of the fall of Satan from heaven. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down in the ground, which didst weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. Cosmic Sean 92 with 100 bits. That makes no sense, though. Evolution basically says humans aren't special, and that's why we shouldn't constantly be effing everything up for other animals. Yeah, I agree. Captain Seculoid with 25 bits. Satan is my daddy. Good to know. Later on in the passage, God says that he will cast down Lucifer. I personally believe that Satan fell from heaven about 100 years after the creation of Adam and Eve. Well, Kent, this is your doctoral dissertation. Now's the time to show your work. Why do you believe that 100 years passed between creation and when Satan fell from heaven? Please, I'd love to hear your reasoning. I believe that he had watched Adam and Eve have fellowship with their creator with pride and envy in his heart. He had been God's choir director since he was created. His desire to be God was thwarted when God cast him out of heaven. Oh gosh, now I'm just thinking of Satan and God as like a catty couple. And Satan's like, God, you've been spending all your time with those weird, naked, pink things in the garden. I got us tickets to Hamilton, and you skipped out so you could go hang out with those beatniks. And God's like, it's work, it's a project, it's a whole thing. They're human beings. I created a whole universe for them. And Satan was like, I heard David Diggs was coming back for this performance. Anyway. Ezekiel 28 tells of Ezekiel taking up a prophecy against Tyrus. It was obvious from the context that the king of Tyre is a picture or a type of Satan. Ezekiel 28, 2 through 5:17 says, Son of a man, say unto the prince of Tyrus, Thus saith the Lord God, because thine heart is lifted up there, here we see the pride, and thou hast said, I am God. I sit in the seat of God in the midst of the seats, yet thou art a man, not God. MMO Addicted with 100 bits. You missed Baja Bit message. Here it's quote, Hannah in chat, I must have misheard what Hannah said. I know I know she knows that lions and tigers aren't the same species. I was just letting her know what most people define as a species, so I apologize. It's okay. I understand. You were just coming in a little spicy, and it made me defensive. Though thou set thine heart as the heart of God, behold, thou art wiser than Daniel. There is no secret that they can hide from thee. With thy wisdom, with thy understanding, thou hast gotten the riches, and hast gotten gold and silver into thy treasures. By the great wisdom and by the traffic hast thou increased thy riches. Thine heart was lifted up because of thy beauty. Thou hast corrupted thy wisdom by reason of thy brightness. I will cast thee to the ground. I will lay thee before kings, that they may behold thee. Combat Tech Sport says, I love how Kent just keeps throwing in stuff from Paradise Lost as if it's in the Bible. I know. A lot of Christians do that. In fair, the difference is I think Kent knows he's doing it, but a lot of Christians don't know that, a lot of Christians don't know that a lot of the canon that people typically ascribe to the Bible is actually Paradise Lost. Or not Paradise Lost, Dante's Inferno and Paradise Lost. Tyrus is a type of Satan who lifted his heart up. Pride is mentioned repeatedly in the Bible as being one of the main things God hates. I have noted several hundred references to pride that show God's attitude towards it. He hates it. Here are several. And then here's just, I will break the pride of your power. Talk no more so exceedingly proudly. The wicked in his pride. Blah, blah, blah. You get it. There you have just a few many verses in the Bible that deal with pride. God hates pride. Okay, well, Kent, why do you think that you know better than scientists, then? Isn't that pride to think that you know better than people who have literally spent their entire lives working towards a better understanding of biology? God hates pride. In his pride, Satan decided he would exalt himself and take over the throne of God. This is where evolution started. I have a question, and this is more theological than evolutionary. Let's say Satan did want to usurp God as, like, I don't know, king of the universe or whatever you want to call God. What makes God have any more right to be the king of the universe than Satan? They're both just, like, supreme beings, right? Why does God automatically have supreme authority that no one gets to question, but Satan is evil automatically for wanting to not have God be the leader of the world? And bear in mind, God created, like, starvation and hurricanes and scorpions and herpes and Margaret Thatcher, all sorts of awful things, right?
Nothing funny about the tools of
Satan,
capitalism.
as far as we know, hasn't done that many evil things in the Bible, right? He's tempted some people. He told Adam and Eve the truth in regard to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. He just said it'll make you, like, be able to know good from bad like God. And he was telling the truth. God kills more people in the Bible than Satan. By a lot. So why do we automatically assume God is the good guy and Satan is the bad guy? Maybe God just has a better PR team. He put the Bible together and he's like, yeah, send that out. Take that, Satan. Satan and a number of angels that followed him were cast down to the earth. Then we have the story repeated in the heart of man. God is trying to exalt himself. This is what evolution is teaching today, that man is the pinnacle, the ultimate. No! Why are you projecting? Evolution just says we're yet more in the chain of living beings on this planet, and there'll be more after us, just like there was plenty before us. That's all it says. It says human beings are just one of many species on this planet, and you can interpret that however you want. I personally think that means you should probably respect your fellow life on this planet. You should try and preserve it, because it's not your right to destroy a world that doesn't belong to you. Yet here you are being like, actually, God loves me the bestest. The creator of the universe personally created me. Not only that, but all the animals that exist around me, they exist for my benefit. And the world, we can do whatever we want to it, because it was literally made for us. That's self-important, self-aggrandizing, narcissistic thinking. Why are you applying that label to evolution when all evolution does is explain that human beings are the result of millions of years of change, and that we happen to be seeing this one spot in time, but it will continue after us, and it has before us. We're not that special. That's the opposite of egotistical. When Satan realized he could not take over the throne of God, he decided to destroy what God had created instead. Satan, in the form of a serpent, brought the doctrine of evolution to the Garden of Eden. No. That's not in the Bible, in case you need to know. The Bible doesn't mention evolution at all, because evolution wasn't discovered until millennia later. In Genesis 3:5, the serpent says to Eve, "Ye shall be as gods." That's an interesting end to the quote. Literally, the entire quote is something along the lines of, "Ye shall be as gods, understanding good from evil as God does," which is the truth. He's specifically talking about you shall be as gods in regard to understanding morality, which is true. When they eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, they learn, oh, this is what good is, this is what bad is, and at that point they have a moral compass. Prior to that, they didn't have one, which, by the way, I question because, like, if you don't have a moral compass, because God didn't give them one, I guess, because they were just supposed to be robots that obey him no matter what, then why should they know that eating from the tree is bad just because God said so? They don't have a moral compass. They don't know good from evil. How do they know that keeping your word is good if they don't have the ability to discern good from evil? Satan wants your attention anytime you try to serve the Heavenly Father, and when Adam and Eve fell for the line that they could become as gods, the doctrine of evolution was successfully introduced to the world. Man's pride and ego had been appealed to, and he was no longer content with the status God had given him. Where did it go from there? Genesis 4:3 says, "And in the process of time it came to pass that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord." Cain knew better. God wanted blood sacrifice. I want to know how Kent can write this and not go, that's weird. Why does God care? Cain and Abel are both hard-working, like one's a farmer and one tends to sheep and livestock, and they're both doing valuable work. Why does God want blood sacrifice? Isn't that a little weird? God had shed innocent blood to cover the sin of Adam and Eve. Cain knew God wanted a bloody animal sacrifice, a lamb to be precise. Cain thought that he could get a favor with God by bringing the work of his own hands. Cain promoted the evolutionary doctrine that man can progress by his own efforts. Evolution has nothing to do with progress by our own efforts, but if we're going there, like, every single improvement ever happening to the human race happened because people did it. Like, sure, people like Isaac Newton were religious, but it wasn't religion that led him to understand gravity. It was math and his own reason and understanding. The same applies to literally every discovery in human history. Cosmic Sean 92 with 100 bits. Yahweh is corn confirmed. Blood for the blood god. It was Cain's pride that caused him to disregard God's commands to bring a lamb. Instead, he brought the fruit of the ground, which represents his own efforts to please God. That doesn't even make sense. Because Abel also brought a lamb, which was the fruit of his labors. He was a shepherd. That's his job. They're both bringing the fruits of their job to sacrifice to God. Highly and Derp with 12 bits. Clearly God is a proponent of Michaela Peterson's carnivore diet. When God rejected his offer, he became angry at God. Since he could not hurt God, he took it out as anger on God's servant, his brother. In pride, he slew his brother because his brother's sacrifice was accepted. We are told later in the New Testament the reason why Cain killed his brother. In John 3:12 we read, "Not as Cain, who was that wicked one, and slew his brother. And wherefore he slew him? because his own works were evil
There's nothing
and his
funny about
brothers
the tools of
righteous.
capitalism.
You heard it here first. Farming is evil. Captain Seculoid with 20 bits. Everything we didn't know before that we have researched has turned out to be not God and not magic, but a natural occurrence. Yeah. I look
There's
nice
nothing
today,
funny
thank
about
you.
the tools of capitalism.
Doesn't the New Testament do a ton of retconning of the Old Testament? Yeah, some, yeah. Why is farming evil? Because God says so, and morality to these people literally goes as deep as, God said so. Okay, well, why is what God says good? Because he's God! So is God capable of doing evil acts, or once he does something, does it become good? Morality's more complicated than that, unfortunately. Or
There's
fortunately.
nothing funny about the tools of capitalism.
Dr. Gamble with 100 bits. Sim farm? More like sin farm. This is still true today. Anyone that does good in this world is hated by those that do evil. Hey, Ken, speaking of those that do evil, what do you think about cheating on your taxes and getting 50 counts of tax fraud and going to jail for 10 years? Is that righteous? Didn't Jesus say, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's? Or does that not apply to you for some reason? Cain's efforts to evolve closer to God met with disaster. I've seen Taffy stretch less than this. Cain was driven out from his family to wander in the world. His descendants apparently continued rejecting God. Man full of pride will seldom admit that he is wrong. This is why Kent continues to not admit that he was convicted of 50-something counts of tax fraud. Cherry Tree Boy with 10 bits. It was fun for the first stream, but now I gotta play daily Yu-Gi-Oh! See you later. Thanks. Thanks for
There's
stopping
nothing funny
by.
about the tools of
Cosmic
capitalism.
Sean 92 with 100 bits. Sovereign Citizen Kent Hovind. He literally is. He's literally a sovereign citizen if you don't know. He has a whole video on it we've covered before. We didn't cover the whole video, but we looked at some of it. The evil in the world continued to get worse until God had to destroy the inhabitants of the earth with a flood. When the flood was over, Satan began to work on Noah's descendants. The story of evolution continues in Genesis 9:22. And Ham, the creator of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his two brethren without him. Ham, instead of doing the wise thing of covering up his father's nakedness, went out and laughed about it to his two brothers, evidently. This resulted in a curse being placed upon Ham's son, Canaan. Imagine walking into it. You're in the Middle East. The Earth was only created like 500 years ago. You're just hanging around. You walk in. You see your dad sleeping, and he's naked. And you go like, oh God. And you walk out, and your brothers are there, and you're like, oh God, you're not going to believe what just happened. I just walked in the tent, and Dad was in there, hanging full dong. It was hilarious. And then all of a sudden, like a light from heaven hits you, and it goes, you are cursed! Maybe an overreaction. This resulted in a curse being placed upon Ham's son, Canaan. Ham's pride caused him, by the way, his son Canaan becomes the patriarch of the Canaanites, who are often antagonists of the Israelites in the Bible. So it's really just an origin story for the evil, race that they don't like. Ham's pride caused him to try to make his father look bad. People who are always cutting down others are usually motivated by pride. They think making someone else look worse will somehow make themselves look better. Have you seen Kent's YouTube channel? His entire channel is like whack an atheist and stuff now.
There's nothing
So
funny
literally
about the
he's
tools of
doing what
capitalism.
he's criticizing here in his doctoral thesis. Oh, sorry. Doctoral thesis. Daddy Sume. No vampires. Nosferatu. The story continues in Genesis 10. The people had been commanded by God to spread out and replenish the earth. Some decided instead to rebel against God's authority and
Nothing
exalt
funny about the
themselves.
tools of capitalism.
Genesis 10, 8-9 says, and Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one in the earth. Thank you, Devious Chilster, for your 4-month subscription streak. Hey, Hannah, on the hospital with pancreatic...
There's nothing funny about the tools of
Hey, Hannah,
capitalism.
on the hospital with pancreatic. Wish me luck. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to hear that. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'm sorry. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. The word before in that verse means in the face of the Lord or against the Lord. Nimrod's rebellion against the Lord caused him to begin construction of the Tower of Babel. We see this tower mentioned in Genesis 11, 1 through 9. And the whole earth was of one language and one speech. It came to pass as they journeyed from the east that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said to one another, Go to, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and slime had they for mortar. And they said, Go to, let us build us a city and a tower, whose top may reach unto heaven, and let us make a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. Dr. Gamble with 50 bits with a link, and then Wing the Ultimate Nug says, Hello, Hannah, how are you? I love watching the VODs. Have the rest of my monthly bits. Thank you, I appreciate that. End of Dinosaurs. We can watch that later. And the Lord came down. Wait, did I miss one? No, I didn't. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men builded. I know, it's the Bible. It's just how it's worded. And the Lord said, Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language, and this they begin to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Go to, let us go down, and there confound their language, that they might not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off the building of the city. Therefore is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth, and from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of all the earth. So, just to be clear, let me recap some stuff. Basically, Kent's entire goal this chapter is to try and illustrate that evolution is somehow prideful, even though it's not. And I've already illustrated that religious belief is more prideful than evolution as a concept. However, this tenuous connection that he's trying to draw, now he goes to the Bible to say that pride is wicked. So he's saying, evolution equals pride, pride equals wicked, therefore, evolution equals wicked. Awful. Awful argumentation. Cosmic Sean 92 with 100 bits. I gotta bounce. Have a good night, Hannah. Try not to have an aneurysm reading Kent's dissertation. Thank you. The tower represented man's desire to exalt himself to the seat of God. The pride of the rebels caused the people to want to disobey God. They wanted to stay together and build big cities, even though God had commanded them to spread out and fill the earth. Kind of a dick move on God's part, right? Could I just point that out? Like, they just wanted to build a big tower to represent, you know, their society, as basically every society in human history has done. Look at the pyramids. Look at, you know, New York City full of skyscrapers, you know? We want to build big things, either for, like, residences, or in the case of something like the pyramids, to show, like, we were here, and this is the tomb of such and such, and they were important. Societies do this, yet God here is like, people getting along can't have that. And then he turns them all into different nationalities, magically. Even though we know that's not how language came about. Different languages, I should say. This tower represents man's desire to exalt himself to the seat of God. Oh, we already read that part. Babylon was one of the first cities built after the flood. It still exists today. The people reluctantly spread out after God judged them by confusing the languages. At this point, they spoke all different languages because the Lord confounded their speech. Weird that people are able to learn other languages, though. Seems like God would have stopped that if that was his goal. I'm sure for several generations they told stories about how it used to be in the good old days when there was just one big city and everyone was one happy family. Yeah, sounds like they were building like a city where people could all get along and like work together. And God's like, ho, 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 can't have that. As we trace the history of evolution, it becomes slightly confusing at this point because there are going to be several different branches on the tree. I will focus on just two of the main branches. When the people left the Tower of Babel, they took their false religion of evolution with them. Kent, evolution wasn't discovered until the mid-1800s. Stop trying to connect it to things that happen in the Bible. No wonder he couldn't get a real doctorate. They still hoped that they could exalt themselves to godhood. For the sake of the study, we shall call them the eastern and western branches of evolution. In the European community, actually, in the area of Asia Minor and in the country of Turkey, we have the western branch of evolution. In the countries of China, Japan, and India, the eastern branch of evolution developed. The branches actually developed simultaneously. What is he talking about? The flood was about 2400 BC, which makes it about 4400 years ago. The Tower of Babel was probably built within the first 300 to 500 years after the flood. He has no evidence for any of this, by the way, because none of it happened. So he's just pulling numbers out of his butt. Let's just assume that it was about 1900 BC when the Tower of Babel was built. Sure, fine, make up years for fake things, I don't care. The people were scattered from the tower. Many people in their pride still tried to find a way to become their own god. This is the basic motive behind evolution. No, it's not. Evolution is a discovery of how life on this planet came to have the variety that it has. That's it. That's the long and short of it. It explains how species change over time and eventually speciate. That's it. That's what it does. For the next several hundred years following the Tower of Babel, there were many evolutionary type myths passed down from generation to generation. Source? In the year 640, thank you to Ray Ping Ba- Oh, funny. Fuck you. For the next several hundred years following the Tower of Babel, there were many evolutionary type myths passed down from generation to generation. In the year 640 BC, Cherry Tree Boy with a bunch of bits. Actually, false alarm. None of my friends wanted to watch my Yu-Gi-Oh gameplay, so I'm back. Hey, Anna. Hello. Welcome. It's time to be disappointed that your friends didn't want to watch you duel. At some point in his life, he began the first of the modern evolutionary doctrines. He said that man had evolved from animals, animals had come from plants. Wait, what? At some point in his life, he began the first modern evolutionary doctrines. He said that man had evolved from animals, animals had come from plants, plants had come from inorganic elements, and all these had come from the water. Anaximander, one of the students of Thales, enlarged on this theory slightly. Anaximander lived from 611 to 547 BC. He taught Pythagoras, who was famous for the Pythagorean theorem in mathematics. Right, but that's not evolution, Kent. There are a lot of, like, classical ideas on how things happen. Look at, like Plato, for instance. He came up with this idea of Platonic ideals. These are not scientific theories, and they're not evolution. That's not what evolution is. Cotton Candy 903. How many times do we need to tell these people that evolution itself doesn't completely discredit God existing? Yeah, right? Even if a God existed and created life, it doesn't change the fact that it's changed over time and that species speciate. Hello. Hey. Yeah. Love you too.
Your hair smells like butter.
My hair's... Ew, that's not good. Yeah, I need to take a shower.
I mean, it's not a bad smell.
Okay.
It's probably just because you put oil in your hair.
Yeah. At this point, there was a split in the evolutionary doctrine. Love you.
Love you too. How long is this fucking chapter?
I don't know. I'm going till we finish the chapter.
Scroll! How many more pages of hell do we have?
Oh my god. I'll call it soon, and then we'll switch to something else, because this is going on for quite a while.
You should call it after this page that you're on.
Okay.
You're on this one.
Okay. Let's see. At this point, there was a split in the evolutionary doctrine. Evolution isn't something that it exists, but humans haven't discovered it, and they're not talking about it because it wasn't discovered until the 1850s. You idiot. One group became atheistic and said that there was no God. Pythagoras started the group that became pantheistic. He said there had to be a God based on the design he saw in nature, but the God that he saw was the God in nature. The idea of limiting God to the natural elements is the underlying theme of pantheism. He lived from 580 to 489 BC. He believed that nature is divine. Nuh-uh. No, why?
There's nothing funny about the
Oh
tools
my
of capitalism.
god! That's bad.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Gotta do something about that at some point.
Yep.
I might have to pay someone to come get that. That's way too big. What am I gonna do? A giant tree branch fell in my front yard. And I don't mean like one that you could like reasonably saw into pieces. Like, that is like...
I might have to actually go try and move it because it looks like it's in the road.
Oof. Anyway. There are basically 3 types of religion in the world. Oh god, he's gonna oversimplify so many things here. You want to see it? I think I could probably move the camera and have you guys see it. Although I don't know how much I want you guys... Nah, it's fine. It's fine. Does Jake not have a chainsaw? I don't know. Jake's on vacation anyway. Let me switch to this camera. I guess you're going to see my street.
Oh.
Oh, shit. God damn it. Hold on, I gotta reset the camera.
Let me hold it. You reset it.
This stupid camera. Come on. Jesus. Sorry, everyone. I'm trying. Okay, Jesus Christ. I hope I didn't just break my camera for good. Oh, Christ. Come on.
Yeah, that probably would have been a good idea, posting a pic on Twitter.
I guess. I think it just recognized it and made a noise. Oh, now it didn't. Jesus Christ. Come on, you stupid fucking camera.
There's nothing funny about the tools of capitalism.
Daddy Sume, this is the timber stream. Funny. Oh, God. Well, we might have to go the rest of the stream without a camera. Because I cannot get it to work. Oh, it just did a thing. And then it stopped. What the hell?
There's nothing funny about the tools of capitalism.
Jesus Christ, I hate this shit.
Wow, Hannah looks different today.
This is all your fault for wanting to see the stupid fucking tree, by the way. Alright, well there's no more camera today. Great. That's not frustrating at all. Okay, it's not gonna work. No camera. Great. Nope. Fuck.
There's nothing funny about the
Dr.
tools of
Gamble with 2,000 bits. We're sorry. Yeah, well. Now I gotta buy a new camera, so that's cool. Anyway, back to the thing. No camera today, I guess. Deal with it.
Yikes, Hannah.
Yeah, I'm really, really mad now. God, now that...
HHHHH9998, don't
There's
feel
nothing funny
bad.
about the tools of capitalism.
Enjoy your Yu-Gi-Oh! Anyway, continuing. There are basically 3 types of religions in the world. The first type is atheism, which says that there is no God. That's not a religion. Atheism isn't a religion. It's a belief, or a lack of belief, if you want to define it that way, but, like, it's not a religion. Psalm 14:1 calls the people who believe there is no God fools. Well, okay, that applies to you because you believe in the Bible, but no one who doesn't believe in the Bible cares what the Bible says, so kind of a weird citation. The second type of religion is pantheistic, which says that nature is God. This group says that the universe is in control of itself and knows what it wants to accomplish. Pantheism imparts a divine nature to the elements. The third type of religion says that God is outside of, above, and beyond his creation. He's not limited by his creation in any way. This is the almighty, infinite God of the Bible. Socrates was a pantheist Greek philosopher who lived from 469 to 399. He's also why we have the Socratic method. Socrates did not leave many writings, but he didn't leave... Socrates left no writings, Kent. He left 0 writings. He didn't know how to write, and he didn't like it. You idiot. Woohoo Lulu with 1,000 bits. How frustrating. Here's towards a new camera. Thank you. I appreciate that. Socrates, around the time of Socrates, writing came about. And he thought that it was wicked and it was going to corrupt the
There's
youth.
nothing funny about the tools
You
of
should
capitalism.
put a picture of yourself up.
Old enough to know more better with 1,000 bits. Sorry for the tech frustration and loss. Cheers for pushing on. You're a star. Thanks. Anyway, Plato wrote prolifically. Plato, like his teacher Socrates, was definitely a pantheist. He also believed that nature is God. Munitz, from his book Theories of the Universe, page 61, says, Plato also makes use of another analogical pattern of thought in describing the universe as an all-inclusive living creature, one body who is perfectly spherical and whose soul animates the whole world. In addition to this world soul, the various individual heavenly bodies are regarded by Plato as divine beings. Again, Kent, that has nothing to do with evolution, though. So I don't know why you're talking about it. Okay, that's all we're gonna read for now. We'll get back to this another time. We'll spin the wheel here in a sec. I just gotta switch the window capture.